Beijing stays silent over the detention of Australian journalist Cheng Lei. NATO and Germany demand answers over the poisoning of Russian opposition figure Alexei Navalny. And flying cars a step closer to reality as trials get underway in Japan. Well, the federal government has been struggling to find out why an Australian newsreader for Chinese state media has been detained in Beijing. Cheng Lei has been held by authorities for weeks now in a highly sensitive case that is again testing relations with the superpower. The TV anchor is a mother of 2 children who are both in Melbourne with her family. Our China correspondent Bill Birtles reports from Beijing.
My name is Cheng Lei. I'm a TV anchor based in Beijing, China, and this is my story.
Cheng Lei epitomised growing ties between Australia and China. In this video promoting her university education in Queensland, the high-profile anchor spoke of how it helped her land a prominent role in the heart of China's political centre.
The beauty of an Australian education is not about what is taught, but more about what it doesn't teach. It doesn't teach you to just follow orders. It allows you that freedom to think for yourself.
Now, as ties with China unravel, many fear politics is at play in her arrest. For weeks, rumours have swirled as she not only lost contact with friends, but her presence on state TV's social media was purged. The government's decision to confirm her detention is a sign hopes of a quick and quiet resolution have faded.
Does the government know why she's been detained?
I'm not in a position to go into that. We, as I said, will continue to provide the consular assistance that we can to her through the proper processes.
Cheng Lei is a prominent figure in Beijing's Australian community, regularly hosting social and embassy events and mixing with the business community. Under China's so-called residential surveillance, investigators could potentially detain and interrogate her for 6 months without charge. In previous highly sensitive cases, lawyers have been denied access. Another Australian detained in Beijing currently, Young Hung Jun, has endured 19 months behind bars without a single lawyer visit. Cheng Lei's 10 and 8-year-old children are with their family in Melbourne. Her family issued a statement saying, "In China, due process will be observed and we look forward to a satisfactory and timely conclusion to the matter." Late today, a government spokesman claimed she knew nothing about the case.
China is a country with rule of law. Everything is handled in accordance with law. If you want to get more information, you can ask competent authorities. I have nothing to offer here.
Friends here in Beijing are in disbelief that this funny, social and down-to-earth woman they know could be accused of anything serious. Many wonder if she's caught up in the middle of a diplomatic spat as an Australian working at Chinese government media. But this is still hugely embarrassing for China's government, detaining one of the faces of its own propaganda channels. Bill Birtles, ABC News, Beijing.
Germany says it has unequivocal proof that Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny was poisoned with the nerve agent Novichok. Chancellor Angela Merkel called on Russia to explain what happened, but Moscow has repeated its denials that it was behind the apparent assassination attempt. Europe correspondent Nick Doll reports.
When Alexei Navalny collapsed on a flight in Siberia last month, Russian medics said there was no sign of poison. But Kremlin critics were sceptical. After he was flown to Germany, doctors there detected the nerve agent Novichok in his body.
We expect the Russian government to give an explanation. There are now grave questions which only the Russian government can and must answer.
Novichok's the same poison used on former spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter in the English city of Salisbury 2 years ago. While they survived, a woman who found a perfume bottle tainted with the nerve agent later died, a scenario which could be repeated in Siberia.
It took 18 months to clean up Salisbury. If this stuff is lying around the airport where he was poisoned or his hotel, there's a huge threat to the local population.
The UK government blamed Russia for the Salisbury attack. Boris Johnson said it was overwhelmingly likely that Vladimir Putin was behind the poisoning. The Prime Minister tweeted, "It's outrageous that a chemical weapon was used against Alexei Navalny. We've seen firsthand the deadly consequences of Novichok in the UK. The Russian government must now explain what happened to Mr Navalny." The European Union has demanded a transparent investigation. Russia has denied responsibility and disputed the German findings.
We already know this scenario. It should be made clear that it has nothing to do with medical findings. It's simply a political story.
But with a growing list of alleged assassination attempts, survivors and relatives are calling for Vladimir Putin to be held accountable for the actions of his regime. Nick Dole, ABC News, London.
Donald Trump has blamed domestic terror for the days of violence that followed the police shooting of Jacob Blake in Kenosha. The US president ignored requests to stay away from the Midwestern city and toured areas damaged in the riots. Here's our North America correspondent, Catherine Diss.
No communism, USA!
From the moment the president arrived, the city's deep divisions were on full display. Trump supporters facing off against Black Lives Matter protesters.
You want to put him in a headlock?
The city has become the latest flashpoint in America's reckoning on race. Another fault line between those calling for racial justice and those wanting peace on the streets.
You can also come out of your house into the streets and have your voice to be heard.
I was asked the other day by somebody saying, do you think it's good that Trump's coming? I said, yeah. They're like, well, don't you think it's going to cause dissension? I go, have you seen our city?
Donald Trump walked through the ruins against the wishes of local leaders who feared his presence would ignite more violence.
So this store was here 109 years, just about the oldest in the nation, doing what you did.
Oldest in the state, for sure.
It's fantastic. And we're going to help them a lot.
He met police and praised their efforts to quell the unrest.
These are not acts of peaceful protest, but really domestic terror.
Say his name.
It was the police shooting of Jacob Blake that sparked the protests. The president didn't meet with his family because they wanted their lawyers present.
We don't have any words for the orange man. All I ask is that he keep his disrespect, his foul language far away from our family.
Absolutely.
We need a president that's going to unite our country and take us in a different direction.
The president, though, focused on the looting and burning, declaring the violence anti-American.
It's just a deflection, you know, it's just like, oh, look at this property damage, but look at the fact that this cop shot this man. I think what has happened over the last week has just shown how deep the racism that exists in this country is and how it shows up in any town from Chicago to Kenosha.
You would expect a president to visit a battleground state, but the cocktail of tensions playing out in Wisconsin offered Donald Trump a platform to reinforce his campaign message of law and order and shift the narrative away from the coronavirus pandemic. The president is claiming victory for stopping the violence in Kenosha, but some say his visit is only further polarising American society.
Silence is violence!
Catherine Diss, ABC News, Washington.
And Donald Trump has been slammed by his presidential rival for failing to have a proper plan to open schools safely. Joe Biden called the issue a national emergency. For many parents and teachers across the United States, it's not been a clear and easy choice. Here's Chief Foreign Correspondent Philip Williams in Washington.
In Washington, D.C., primary school teacher Lauren Tate and her son are preparing to return to school from summer break. But like many states and territories, it's back to virtual learning for all the capital's public schools.
Hopefully, things will be better. If not, that we just stay home until they are.
Yeah, I miss being with my friends. I miss it.
In nearby Virginia, it will be kind of back to normal for the Dow Lawrence family. Reagan, JJ and Carter will soon return to the classroom, but each desk at their private school will be contained within a plexiglass pod. Students will learn and lunch inside their protective bubble.
I wouldn't be surprised if, in the flu season here in the U.S. when that kicks off in November, if we're back to virtual learning again.
I'm kind of ready to get back to the school environment and not really much at home.
Some teachers are worried not enough is being done to protect them from infections. Primary school teacher Ashley Newman has quit her dream job teaching 5th grade in Georgia rather than risk her family's health.
15! If the teachers aren't safe, then the students aren't safe, and then the community isn't safe. It's a ripple effect.
With the world's worst death toll and 1,000 Americans dying every day, many are sceptical of President Trump's demand the schools reopen.
They do very well. I mean, they don't get very sick. They don't catch it easily. I think schools have to open. We want to get our economy going.
President Trump still doesn't have any real plan for how to open our schools safely. No real plan.
This whole school issue could be the making or breaking of President Trump. And already some schools that have reopened have had to close again because of coronavirus. Caught in the middle, 60 million children and many millions more parents just trying to do their best, educate their loved ones and keep everyone safe. Philip Williams, ABC News.
India has recorded the world's highest single-day increase in coronavirus cases with 79,000 infections. The rise comes as the government continues to lift restrictions to try and boost the ailing economy. Here's South Asia correspondent James Oaten.
Mumbai in the monsoon, and around a dozen labourers are making slow progress on this construction site. These workers fled the city as it became engulfed with coronavirus. Now they've returned, desperate to work.
I came back to the city because there was no work at my place. I had no other option.
The disease is now spreading in the villages, so it doesn't matter whether you live in a village or in Mumbai.
India's reliance on migrant workers was exposed when the country went into a nationwide lockdown in March. Some were kicked off their work site, others just wanted to get home. Many walked hundreds of kilometres in what became the largest internal migration since independence.
The panic was everywhere, and the migrants were also panicked.
One of them was Rampukar Pandit. He became a symbol of the migration when this photo was taken. His wife had just called to say their infant son was gravely ill.
I will not go back to Delhi at any cost. I will not migrate to another place for work.
He didn't make it home on time. His son died.
I miss my son very much. Had I been here, I would have saved him.
One recent survey found a third of migrant workers have ruled out returning to the cities.
I think that treatment given to the migrants were so bad, they don't mind dying, even starvation, at villages rather than going back.
Companies like this one are now offering sweeteners to try and lure back their staff from faraway states. But most transport options aren't available.
My employer provided me a return ticket, accommodation on site, and took care of my welfare.
The importance of migrant workers has been fully highlighted by this lockdown.
Supporting one of the country's most valuable resources. James Oaten, ABC News.
Australians stranded overseas by coronavirus are continuing to battle cancelled flights and exorbitant airfares in their efforts to get home. So a group of parents in London are taking things into their own hands.
Meet 4-month-old Callan, 4-month-old Ailish and Charlie, who's just 7 weeks old. They're just a few of London's lockdown babies, and now their Australian parents want to introduce them to their families back home.
You're being robbed of so many just incredible memories of her that you want to share with your family and you can't. This is my daughter Ailish.
When Carly McCrossan posted this video to social media, she soon realised she wasn't alone.
Outside of all of the babies that we'd like to take home, there are so many Australians still in London at the moment who can't get home.
Australia's caps on international arrivals have turned air travel into a virtual lottery, with thousands of passengers competing for the right to return. Melbourne's not accepting any arrivals. Sydney only allows 350 per day, while Perth, Brisbane and Adelaide each have a weekly allocation of around 500. So Carly McCrossan's started a campaign to fill a charter flight with young Australian families.
65 people registered, so that's over 60 families, about 120 people, 70 babies, so it'll be a really noisy flight.
They're getting quotes from airlines, but what they really need is an assurance from the government they'll be able to land. For many families, returning earlier simply wasn't an option.
The thought of getting on a plane, I don't think physically I could have done that. I was 8 months pregnant, but my partner's English, my life is here, my work is here. You can't just suddenly click your fingers and go back to Australia.
So what are your options if you're an Australian hoping to leave London? Well, one-way economy fares in early September ranged from about $2,600 to nearly $25,000. There are some reasonable fares available around Christmas time, but just because the airlines are selling these tickets doesn't mean they'll actually let the passengers on the plane. Booking business or first-class fares can improve a passenger's chances, but many travellers can't afford that. These parents don't need luxury, just a plane to fly their precious cargo home. Nick Dole, ABC News, London.
Israel's Supreme Court has rejected Malka Leifer's appeal that she's mentally unfit to stand trial. The former principal of Adas Israel School in Melbourne has been fighting an extradition application that would see her return to Australia to face sexual assault charges. Our Middle East correspondent Eric Torchek has more.
The former principal of Melbourne's Adas Israel School, Malka Leifer, has been fighting an extradition application that would see her return to Australia to face 74 charges of abusing former students. She had been alleging that mental illness made her unfit to stand trial, until a Jerusalem court rejected that earlier this year. Now Israel's Supreme Court has rejected her appeal against that decision, meaning the main obstacle to her extradition has been removed. After 6 years of campaigning, that's welcome news to her alleged victims.
The question about Malka Leifer's mental fitness has been probably over 20, 30, 40, maybe even 50 court hearings. This has been an extended journey just regarding her mental fitness. Now that this decision and the appeal has finally been denied, we can move on to the extradition hearing on the 21st and bring her back to Australia where she's meant to be.
The Jerusalem District Court will announce a final decision on extradition later this month, but that can also be appealed.
Well, Lebanon has chosen a new Prime Minister after the ambassador to Germany received overwhelming support for the role. He's now faced with multiple crises, including a collapsing economy and most recently the fallout over who was to blame for the Beirut explosion. Here's Yvonne Young.
Lebanon's ambassador to Germany got the backing of senior politicians and former prime ministers to become the next premier. Lawmakers in Shiite group Hezbollah also nominated Mustafa Adib to the position, with all sides of politics, it seems, agreeing that the economy needs urgent attention.
We need a government capable of improving the economic and living situation, and also to do reconstructions and reforms.
It's the President who, in consultation with Parliament, gets the final say on who becomes Prime Minister. But in a speech marking Lebanon's 100th anniversary of the state's formation, the President said it's the system that needs to change.
I believe that only a secular state is capable of protecting and preserving pluralism and turning it into real unity. I call for the proclamation of Lebanon as a secular state.
Lebanon's political system is currently governed by the 1990 Taif Accord, which ended the 15-year civil war. It divides state posts according to sex, with the president being a Maronite Christian, the Speaker of Parliament a Shia Muslim, and the Prime Minister a Sunni Muslim. The previous Prime Minister and his cabinet resigned in the aftermath of the Beirut blast that killed 190 people. Protesters are also concerned about the deepening financial crisis and now a surge in coronavirus cases, leading to calls for political reforms.
The youth of Lebanon have demanded this change. Their voices are everywhere calling for a change to the system. Shall we listen to them? These are our future generations, and for them and for their future, I say yes, it is time.
French President Emmanuel Macron, who's visiting, is also hoping Lebanon, one of the most indebted nations in the world, will pay attention to international efforts to get the fractious leaders to address the economic crisis. Yvonne Yong, ABC News.
A young gynaecologist in Kenya has used coronavirus lockdowns to start a life-saving ambulance service for women in childbirth. Now it's a permanent lifeline for poor women who need help getting to hospital. Eric Torchek.
At night, the streets of Nairobi are shut, but not for this life-saving service.
That's affirmative, that's affirmative.
A woman in Kenya's poor settlements has gone into labour and needs to get to hospital. Trainee gynaecologist Jemima Kariuki is supervising her transport.
How often is the pain coming?
At the height of the coronavirus lockdowns, women couldn't get to hospital to have their babies until Dr. Kariuki stepped in to help.
We were having more rates of children passing on either through stillbirth or other issues or complications of tears that had been quite extensive. Home deliveries had increased, and so there needed to be something that would be done.
Kenya's had nearly 30,000 confirmed coronavirus cases. In March, it implemented a nightly curfew from 7 p.m. until 5 a.m, confining people to their homes. Police brutally enforced the restrictions, making many people scared to break the curfew, even if they needed medical help. So Dr. Kariuki created a dedicated hotline and transport service called Wheels for Life that's now helped more than 6,000 women give birth safely. It mainly helps women in poor and hard-to-reach areas that don't have good access to healthcare.
If it wasn't for Dr. Jemima, I would have given birth at home, and my daughter would probably have died.
Poor women in Kenya still face many problems accessing healthcare, but Dr. Kariuki is now expanding the call centre and ambulance service to ensure they'll continue to get advice and transport after the pandemic.
Women will always be pregnant, you know, and it's a journey you don't want to walk alone. See if they can have this number to always call and go like, I need help, we are free to help.
So, from a global disaster, something good has been born. Eric Twarchek, ABC News.
Well, there's been no restriction hangover in China, with the world's most populous nation quickly reopening to domestic tourism. And with the virus almost behind it, the country is turning its attention to economic recovery, starting with its answer to Oktoberfest. Bill Birtles reports from the eastern city of Qingdao.
The party's back on in China. Long nights and harsh hangovers in a country moving on from coronavirus. Asia's answer to Oktoberfest is relatively subdued this year, but the fact a major beer festival is going ahead shows just how quickly China's bouncing back.
This year is a bit smaller than other years, but the atmosphere is just as good. Everyone's rowdy.
Every year, former soldier Zhang Xiaoxin and his mates travel 5 hours to get to Qingdao for the beer festival. It's an annual pilgrimage that they weren't going to miss, even in a pandemic year.
I'm not scared. I don't need a mask.
China's borders remain shut, but tour groups are now permitted to crisscross the country again. The reopening gave a major boost to Qingdao just in time for the festival. Criticised abroad for the initial cover-ups and mistakes that allowed the virus to spread from Wuhan, China's government has now almost stopped all domestic transmission. Smartphone tracking systems that you can't opt out of have helped authorities hone in and contain local outbreaks when they happen. And according to the official figures, China's economy dodged a recession and is already growing at rates others would envy.
I think because China's policy on containing the virus is kind of strict or very careful. So I think it's a natural way so that it will bounce back. But looking at right now, I think it's in the recovery stage and it will continue to recover with some mild fluctuations.
Some areas are recovering better than others. While factories and construction sites are bouncing back, many Chinese are still cautious to open their wallets and spend on holidays and services again. Qingdao's beaches might now be heaving with thousands of families, but the people who rely on them for a living, like shop owner Wang Bin, say they're normally far busier.
We've all had a tough year. It's way down on last year.
There's still a lot of caution here, both about the virus and whether China's economy can really recover so quickly. But at the beer festival, they're throwing caution to the wind.
China's government allowed this festival to go ahead because it said people need a chance to feel normal again. For 8 months, this country has taken drastic action to contain the outbreak. And this is the payoff.
Bill Birtles, ABC News, Qingdao.
Well, lots of planes around the world might be grounded at the moment, but the Japanese are looking to take to the skies in another way. One company is trialling flying cars, and you might be able to get behind the wheel sooner than you think. Our North Asia correspondent Jake Sturmer reports from the secret test site in central Japan.
For a country renowned for its transport, Japan is hoping to be at the forefront of the next revolution in travel. This is a glimpse into what that might look like. A vision that was once limited to cartoon science fiction,
Meet George Jetson,
finally taking shape nearly 60 years on. For just a few minutes in a highly controlled display, SkyDrive's chief engineer showed off the prototype in the company's top-secret test field. Eventually, by 2050, they want you to be able to fly anywhere in Tokyo in just 10 minutes.
I think flying cars will become normal in the near future. The cost will go down as more cars will be made. The world of flying in the air will become more accessible.
Safety is clearly an issue. The closest we could get to the car in the air was behind layers of safety glass, scaffolding and netting. The company has hired experts with decades of experience building jets to help navigate the complex safety requirements and regulations.
Today's flight had a highly skilled pilot, but it'll become easier to operate the vehicle in a few years and it won't require advanced skills.
The plan is to be able to hail something like this commercially by 2023, but getting this type of technology off the ground safely requires more than just extraordinary engineering. Aviation bodies and governments have a huge role to play too.
We need these vehicles to be able to talk to each other. We can't put a stop sign up in the air, so we need a lot of thought about how we're going to control the traffic to make this work.
Big players like Boeing and Airbus are involved in the race to be first with their flying cars. Uber also wants to be in the skies by 2023, but they'll need to be accepted by the cities they fly over.
If they see it as toys for the rich, then they won't accept it. If they see a benefit for their own personal life, then I think it will gain acceptance.
Sky-high ambition for the travel of tomorrow. Jake Sturmer, ABC News, Aichi.
And that ends the program. You can head to the ABC's World News page for all the latest international headlines and join me on the World weeknights on the ABC News channel. I'm Bev O'Connor. Thanks so much for your company. Bye-bye.